The third episode of Blake 7 finally brings us to the prison world of Cygnus Alpha. You might recall Terry Nation also included a prison world similar to this place in his Doctor Who epic, The Daleks' Master Plan. Basically, prisoners are dropped off on this backwater and whatever happens, happens. As we start with the Gordon Ramsay of Cygnus Alpha, joined by this lucky lady as he sorts out the problems of this rustic but charming bistro, the light in the sky indicates that the prison ship has indeed arrived, and not a moment too soon for the captain who wants this disaster of a mission over with. His official report doesn't downplay a thing, and without Raker about to give everyone an aura of evil, he's a bit more sympathetic. After all, while Avon, Villa, and Jenna are all guilty of nothing more than stealing from the Federation in one form or another, the rest could very well be a nasty bunch. In theory, anyway. In actuality, I think they're more than likely non-violent offenders and or political prisoners, since none of them save Gan and maybe the guy who was shot first put up much of a fight, though admittedly that could have been the drugs. But also, Blake's willing to take them all on board as his crew, and while he's hardly in a position to be choosy, he does need a crew that he can trust to toe the line, which suggests that Gan is probably the only violent felon among them. At the moment, Blake is inspecting his new ship. Naturally, it's his ship, his name is in the title after all. Although at the moment, it's only Blake's 3. They discover guns shaped more like those things that prop up bookshelves than firearms. Even takes a moment to point one at Blake, just to make a point that he is now free to do whatever he likes. Blake's had enough shit over the past 8 months, though, that barely slows him down in his day-to-day activities, and moves on to look over the ship some more. There's a lot of controls they have no idea what they could possibly do, so let's press a couple and see what happens. Okay, that one turns on the fan. The next one has an unusual reaction.
Answering. No!
Well, that was a weird journey from panic to O-face. But now there's a new voice, that of the computer, Zen, who after learning their language from Jenna, as well as the new name for the ship, the Liberator, seems kinda helpful. But as Avon is quick to note, it's deliberately ignoring Blake's questions in the midst of that helpfulness, the kind of things computers shouldn't do. Another interesting discovery is thanks to Avon's experience. Before he went into bank robbing, he handled the computing for a group working on matter transmission. Blake worked on that project too. Even a revolutionary has to pay the bills, remember. Anyway, it's similar to what we have here, meaning that the alien ship has a teleporter and no other known ship has one. That's going to come in handy. You know, if it works. The play with the buttons plan was already a bad idea. Who wants to try out the teleporter is even less attractive. The bracelets seem to have something to do with it, and it even has a radio in it.
Hello? Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Fans, for the past 2 weeks you've been hearing about the bad break I got. Yet today I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth. They'll have to ask Zen, but he already has other news for them. They've arrived at Cygnus Alpha, as have the prisoners, who aren't too keen on being in holding, but even less keen on getting released onto the surface of this crap hole. Arco and Selman have joined Gan and Villain having speaking roles as they nervously stumble out of their cages once the prison ship is gone, with Gan seeming to take the leader role by virtue of not being scared of everything. They have a reason to be scared, though, as they soon find someone who is crucified with a sign, "So perish unbelievers." I hate it when people show up at your new house trying to convert you to their religion. Meanwhile, Blake's decided that it's not safe to try to land the ship, so he'll risk having Avon operate the teleport, despite Avon himself saying it's a stupid risk, which says something when someone who pointed a gun at you 15 minutes ago is trying to look out for your best interests. But Blake heads down. Not bad. Although that hospital tape transmission could use a little improvement. His arrival has drawn the attention of the cult, for one of their most heinous sins is employing bad special effects. Their sect believes strongly in minimizing the effort in slaughtering unbelievers, so they just show up on all sides of Blake, let him tire himself out in his attempt to escape them, and then at the signal, pull out the knives. Must be doing pretty well to have knives. Must be doing even better to have firewood on a planet where we haven't seen anything larger than weeds. Luckily for Blake, Jenna and Avon eventually figure out how to teleport him back up again, so Blake figures, given the hostile environment and the hostile residents, he shouldn't need much convincing to get the prisoners to join his crew. The welcoming hall here certainly isn't encouraging.
There's a building.
Cozy.
What do you think it is?
The architectural style is early maniac.
And I probably don't need to tell you it's run by the cultists who show up now.
I am the servant of your god. Kneel.
God's name is Neil? Man, your religion sucks. They're all led inside, Blake arriving not long after thanks to the teleport and the assumption that anyone willing to follow him would see this horrible place and go, ooh, I can't wait to see what's in there! And as scary looking as it is, it's amazing for convicts dropped onto a barren world to pull off. I mean, they've mastered vaulted ceilings and arches and doorknobs and everything. They must have had quite a bit of motivation to pull that off.
Blessings are upon you. Speak, and he will hear you.
I suppose Brian Blessed shouting at you is all the motivation you need. Yes, he even made note of this appearance years later.
According to the Blake 7 website, the program was notorious for its elementary continuity errors. Not in my day.
Now, it might not seem like it, but Brian Blessed is an obvious choice for a preacher. Just take a look at Isaiah 62, verse 1. For Zion's sake, I will not keep silent. And for Jerusalem's sake, I will not be quiet. They're quick to discuss the new recruits and the important lessons that they'll need to learn in order to make them dedicated members of his cult, which is important. This is mostly how they expand. Obviously, there is some breeding taking place, but overall, more prisoners coming is the way that his power base grows. The arrivals have begun to succumb to the sickness of Cygnus Alpha, but he has the cure, the way to survive on this hellhole. Meanwhile, Jenna and Avon have nothing to do but speculate about how the teleporter's range might work. Always good to have an idea of how to put someone back together again, after all. Avon warns there's probably a maximum range to it that, if you try to go beyond, the person would probably appear just long enough to scream before being reduced to atoms. Which really does demand some kind of warning label on here. Meanwhile, Blake has snuck in and has been searching for the others, finally discovering them in a holding cell, recovering thanks to the medicine the priests gave them. But you have to take it daily or come down with a case of dead. Except Blake's been here long enough to get infected and he's perfectly fine. Maybe it's not a disease. Maybe it's something that lives in Brian Blessed's beard. Or maybe it actually is Brian Blessed's beard. I mean, I've often wondered if the beard is turning his screams for help into words so that that's why he's always shouting. But whatever the cause, we're going to have to wait on that as Blake gets knocked out by a cultist and chained up to answer to the big cheese himself. He gets Blake to tell his story and reveals that he is descended from some of the first prisoners, and thus he rules this cult by right of succession, because, no one is more inclined to honor tradition than criminals. After Brian Blessed monologues about that for a while, Blake finally surrenders and apologizes, if only to stop his ears from bleeding. He tries to make a deal for him and the others, but is quickly refused. The only thing of value here are more hands to do his bidding. He wants to take his religion and franchise it now. Blake naturally refuses to give his ship up to Elron Bluster, so he gets tortured for that. But he has to keep the Liberator safe from anyone who would take it. On a completely unrelated topic, Jenna and Avon have discovered a treasure room on the ship full of ridiculous amounts of wealth, enough for them both to live like royalty on any world they like, or pretty much to buy any world they like. All they would have to do is just fly away.
He's a crusader. He'll look upon all this as just one more weapon to use against the Federation. And he can't win. You know he can't win. What do you want to be? Rich or dead?
Oh, does it have to be one or the other? I hate picking between two things. Jenna finally offers an hour to wait for Blake. If he doesn't respond by then, they'll give him up for lost and go on a shopping spree to see which shops they'll buy. Meanwhile, Blake has been thrown in with the rest of the new arrivals who have just been told that until Blake cooperates, none of them are going to get the drug that they need to live. What's more, one of them is going to be taken away as a human sacrifice. Now, that always bugged me about human sacrifice. How much are you really giving up if you find someone you don't know and kill them? I mean, if you sacrifice a goat, well, you're out a meal that could feed an extended family. But you sacrifice Ted, whom you've never met before, it's not like you're out in all the plans that you had for Ted, but you only grabbed him because you worship a god that asks you to show your devotion by killing somebody and who is willing to settle for no one you'd actually miss. Alright, but I'm getting off the subject. Blake insists that he's not giving up the ship, so their only hope is to join him in attempting an escape, nick the drugs on the way out, and hope that it all goes well. Next thing you know, Gan is being brought in to be sacrificed, so much for hope. Actually, this is all a trick. They must have jumped the cultists and taken their place. And that's why you shouldn't give in to the temptation of robes with hoods. They may fit the atmosphere of your evil cult, but they make it way too easy for the heroes to just slip around undetected. They go for the bracelets, but Avon's not too keen about bringing up a zealot and his followers, so there's some stalling. Meanwhile, the fight continues below. So we've got Avon and Jenna up on the ship. We've got another crew member who's scheduled to join in episode 4. And then down below, we've got Gan, Villa, Arco, and Selman. That's them, Blake 7. Only...
Villa! Where's Selman? He's dead.
Someone asked, do you really need for Blake to have 7 companions? Just because the show is called Blake 7? So poor Arco and Selman got axed, and Blake wound up counting himself and the computer to make 7. Which is lucky, because if they picked one more to go, they'd probably have given Gan a hand puppet and listed that as the 7th. Although it's hard not to see Blake 7 with Mr. Flibble as being anything less than awesome. And if you think they're not above some slapstick...
No!
And Exhibit B... The People Rest. In the midst of the action/slapstick, the bracelet comes off and Brian Blessed grabs it, along with the gun. And in all the confusion, he's up on the ship along with Blake, Villa, and Gan, while the Liberator is flying off. When Blake tries to cow him with the certainty that without their help he'll die of that disease, he laughs at them. It was all a con to keep everyone under his control. But then he makes the mistake of stepping onto the teleporter, and Avon's theory is put to the test. They say in space, no one can hear you scream. But once again, Brian Blessed proves them wrong. What Terry Nation has done down has broken down Blake's progress into 3 steps. Step 1, he gets a cause. Step 2, he gets the means to fight for that cause. Step 3, he gets followers to join in the fight for that cause. It's a sort of hero's journey, but open-ended. Blake is called to the cause, is reluctant to undertake it, undergoes a transformation in episode 1. In episode 2, he is momentarily overcome due to his morality in the face of the amorality that he opposes. He receives supernatural aid, this time in the form of a ship appearing at the right moment that has power otherwise unimaginable. In episode 3, he gathers allies and shows his resolve. But by its nature, Blake's journey is ongoing. He is attempting to overcome an entrenched power, and even with all he has acquired, that's no simple task. The characterization provided by Boucher is handled equally well, turning a lot of rather formulaic scenes into something through sharp dialogue and subtle characterization. During the mission, Avon and Jenna both wonder aloud if they are capable of killing. I mean directly killing someone, if it came down to it, as neither of them have, and they aren't too sure if they could, even though both are portrayed as strong-willed individuals. Meanwhile, Villa, the comic relief character whose behavior with the gun wound up leading to their uprising failing, he finds himself in that fight amongst the cultists, and the guy who threw down a gun in terror picks up a knife and stabs a cultist in the back to save Blake's life. But after that, stares at the knife in horror as he realizes what he's done on instinct. It's an extremely subtle vindication for his embarrassing failure, and a sign that he can fit in this group after all. In contrast, Avon talks a good game and is prepared to leave Blake down there, but he won't harm Jenna to do it, even though he has a gun and has a willingness to point it at his allies. But he can't bring himself to directly murder someone, no matter how much he wants the riches that this ship and its treasure offers. Blake himself has changed from the revolutionary he was into the one that he is now. Whatever his previous motives, he can't recall, but he does know the Federation took his past, killed his family, and convicted him of a heinous crime with false evidence. His motive to destroy it is revenge. While that act will benefit the galaxy, that fact has to be kept in mind as it colors Blake's motives. The upside is that 3 episodes do a fine job of establishing 3 distinct yet interconnected tales, 3 different settings, 3 different adversaries, 3 different problems that must be resolved. It certainly betrays Nation's involvement in Doctor Who, because much like many of its early stories, each chapter is flowing from one directly to the next. The downside of these is that the first and third feel bloated, while 2 has so much it feels like 2 episodes instead of 1. In fact, it's hard to keep up with the passage of time given the 8 months that we're told this trip takes. When do these long breaks happen? Are the trio confined for months or just hours? It seems like so much of 3 is spillover from 2 to help pad out its runtime. Still, overall, the pros more than outweigh the cons and has the series well underway, which we'll continue to see throughout this year.
He gave them a religion, brought them together in the love and fear of God. That is the line I stem from. That is what gives me the right to rule!